On one side we have the world's smallest APS-C camera with a 28mm fixed lens. It can fit right in your pocket and it's probably the most hyped camera right now. On the opposite side we have a full-frame powerhouse with a high-end 28mm lens. It comes with superior image quality and mind-blowing features that its opponent could only dream of. I took both cameras out on the streets to see how they perform in real-life situations. This isn't going to be a technical or feature-by-feature comparison, but instead a real-world test in everyday scenarios. My goal is to find out if the Ricoh GR IV can even compete with a full-frame camera, so I'm going to test both of them in the following categories: shooting experience, image quality, low-light performance, and video, even though the last one is meant just for fun. Don't take this seriously. Make sure to watch until the end. I will be comparing image quality side by side, and the results might surprise you more than you expect. And a few disclaimers before we start. I bought both cameras with my own money, and no one has influenced my opinions. The reason I'm testing the Ricoh GR IV with the Sony A7C II is because this is the only full-frame camera I own. The results should be similar with any other modern full-frame camera. By the way, I have created a separate review just about the Sony A7C II, so if you want to find out how this camera performs on its own, feel free to check it out. Alright, so can this tiny camera actually compete with a full-frame beast? Let's find out. First of all, let's see how it's like to use a Ricoh GR IV. Of course, its biggest selling point is its size and portability. If you compare it to a full-frame camera like the Sony A7C II, it is 3 times lighter and smaller. And the A7C II is actually one of the smallest full-frame cameras on the market. That means the GR IV can fit right in your pocket, so you can take it everywhere without the need for a backpack. Because it's so lightweight, it also causes much less fatigue when photographing. I can now go on longer walks and my back suffers much less. Despite all of that, my absolute favorite thing about this camera is that I can use it entirely with one hand. It makes shooting feel so much more relaxed and fun. Another important benefit of its small size is that it gives you invisibility superpowers, and this is where it beats every camera out there. With the GR IV, it is much easier to get closer to your subjects while going unnoticed. In many occasions, I notice that people tend to ignore me when I shoot with a camera this small. And this of course helps you capture the candid moments you have always wished for. Now let's talk about focusing. Currently Sony cameras have the fastest autofocus systems, but can it get any faster than that? Enter snap focus. With the GR IV, you can preset the focus distance before taking the shot and instantly take any photo without waiting for the camera to focus. This is exactly like using manual zoom focusing on any other camera, but the fact that you can set this with a press of a button makes it one of the most revolutionary features you will ever use. On the other hand, the autofocus of the GR IV is pretty good in situations with bright light. It is certainly not as bad as people make it look, and it is reliable as long as the light conditions are good. In terms of flexibility, the GR IV is highly customizable. And I say that after I have been spoiled with the Sony A7C II, which is one of the most customizable cameras I have used so far. It comes with multiple dials, and you can set up every button to work exactly how you want, which makes shooting fast and easy. I especially like the fact that one of the dials is clickable, which gives you access to a quick menu in addition to the already customizable function button. Moreover, you can customize the side button with 2 functions, one for a single press and one for a long press. I also love the ease of use of the exposure compensation button, and I agree it is much more practical than a scroll wheel. It has also surprised me how responsive is this camera and how remarkably fast it wakes up. Comparing it with a modern full-frame camera, it is equally as fast to turn on. This is crucial for avoiding missing shots when shooting on the streets. Of course, like everything, it's not perfect. The biggest drawback for me is the lack of a viewfinder. You have to rely on the LCD screen, which doesn't even flip out. Battery life isn't great, but it's not terrible. I usually get about 350 shots with one charge, but at least the batteries are tiny and it is easy to carry extras. Also, it's not ideal for use in bad weather since it doesn't have weather sealing. But here's the thing, and maybe that's an important part. This camera is so fun to use. In the past, I have shot with all kinds of camera, from Sony to Fujifilm and Canon, but besides few settings and the configuration of the buttons, the experience was not much different. The Ricoh GR IV is so small that I want to take it with me everywhere. I end up shooting more, while at the same time I'm having more fun. And for me, that's what matters the most. This tiny camera is so fun to use, but nothing of this matters if the image quality is lacking. So let's see how the Ricoh GR IV competes against a modern full-frame camera. I'm going to test image quality in terms of dynamic range, noise performance, color reproduction and sharpness. My tests are not going to be highly technical or be done in a controlled environment, because I want to show you how the GR4 performs in real-life situations. For this reason, I took both cameras to the streets in a photograph as I normally would. I also tried to capture the same scenes with similar settings on both cameras so the results are directly comparable. All photos I'm going to show you were shot in RAW and they are not color graded or edited. I have only made very few small exposure adjustments where necessary to match the exposures and keep the photos visually consistent. First, let's look at some high contrast scenes to see how dynamic range performs. Can you tell which photo was taken with which camera? It's honestly impossible to tell, and the Ricoh performs exceptionally well here. In both cases the blacks are equally deep and the highlights hold up surprisingly well. Even when editing and pushing the highlights or shadows, there isn't much difference between the two cameras. I tried to leave the shadows or recover the highlights, and I noticed that both cameras reveal the same amount of detail without seeing an increase in noise. I'm honestly very surprised. At least for photos that were taken during the day, it seems that both cameras are equally powerful. That of course might change when we test low light performance, so stay tuned to see what happens. Now let's take a look at noise performance for a few shots I took during the day. I'm also going to put a link to a blog below with the full resolution photos so you can check all the details for yourself. It's worth mentioning that I have disabled any kind of noise reduction in the settings for both cameras to keep things fair, and I haven't applied any noise reduction. Look at these images. When ISO is low, there is almost no noise, but I'm surprised how well the GR4 holds up as the values are increasing. Even at ISO 16400, I just can't see any differences between the two cameras, no matter how close I look. Again, that might change when we review low light performance, but so far I'm absolutely blown away. When it comes to color reproduction, this usually depends on the camera manufacturer. Since all the photos in this comparison were shot in RAW, any differences are minimal and mostly subjective. However, it's worth mentioning that the Ricoh is famous for having a wide range of custom recipes. There are various apps and online resources you can use, so if you like shooting in JPEG with custom recipes, the GR4 has a clear advantage. Now in terms of sharpness, we need to be mindful that we're comparing a tiny 28mm fixed lens with a high-end full-frame lens that is bigger than the Ricoh camera itself. But even with this uneven comparison, the photos coming out of the GR4 are exceptionally sharp. Even at wider apertures, the images are sharp from the center all the way to the corners. As the f-stop increases, I honestly don't see much difference and the results remain consistently excellent. What an impressive job, Ricoh! I don't know what you think so far, but my opinion is that the Ricoh GR4 holds up really well against a full-frame camera. In terms of image quality, the differences were very small, and in most of the cases I had a hard time telling which camera took which photo. So far, I have been pleasantly surprised with the performance of this tiny beast. But now, let's see if it can actually compete in low lights. Alright, finally it's time for the moment you have been waiting for. Let's talk about low light performance. I took both cameras out at night with the goal of testing image quality, ISO performance and stabilization in low light situations. This is where full-frame cameras are expected to dominate, and actually this is the point I was expecting the Ricoh GR4 to struggle the most, but the results completely shocked me. Let's start with ISO performance. At lower ISO values, the noise in both cameras is identical. As you increase the ISO, you would expect the full-frame camera to have the advantage, but I honestly don't see much of a difference. In both cameras, grain becomes more noticeable at ISO 3200, but they seem to produce a very similar amount of noise. Moreover, in both cases the images remain equally sharp and the colors do not fall apart. Even at ISO 6400, the images from the GR4 are absolutely usable for night photography. I could not believe it. At first, I thought I was doing something wrong. I double-checked all my settings, made sure noise reduction was turned off from both cameras, and confirmed I was shooting at the highest image quality. Then I went ahead and I tried the unthinkable. I tested both cameras at ISO 1200. Again, the results shocked me. When there is enough light in the scene, photos from both cameras seems to have the same amount of noise. Only in extreme low light situations the full frame seems to produce less noise, but even in this case the results are maybe 10% better, certainly not 2 or 3 times better like many people believe. But there is a caveat, and it's something we briefly mentioned earlier. When it comes to editing, the full frame camera has a clear advantage here. When a photo is captured with exactly the same settings, lifting the shadows on the full frame file reveals more detail with less noise. That advantage becomes even more noticeable in low light. But still, considering the sensor size, what the GR4 delivers here is honestly impressive. ISO performance is just part of the story. Stabilization is equally important because in low light situations you often have to use slower shutter speeds. The GR4 does a great job here thanks to its 6 stops of image stabilization. I managed to get sharp results quite easily at shutter speeds of up to half a second, and in some cases I even managed to capture usable photos at 1 full second. Autofocus in low light is where the difference becomes more noticeable. The full-frame camera is more reliable and consistent as light levels drop significantly. The GR4 can struggle in darker scenes, which can lead to more missed shots. However, this is where snap focus comes back into play. By presetting your focus distance, you completely avoid focus hunting and the camera becomes extremely fast and predictable, even at night. Looking at the final results, the story is not what we expect it to be. A tiny camera like the Ricoh GR IV and APS-C cameras in general have come a long way. The GR4 is an excellent choice for shooting at night, even at high ISO values. And yes, a full-frame camera will give you more space to fix mistakes during editing, but as long as you expose correctly, the GR4 will get the job done. Combine that with strong image stabilization and snap focus, and this tiny beast can do wonders. Okay, this part of the video is going to be short and it's meant just for fun. Probably you have already heard that video in Ricoh cameras is bad, but the question is how bad it is. It is that bad. The GR4 by no means is meant to be used for video. It only records video in 1080p resolution and it doesn't even let you adjust the aperture or shutter speed. The incredible thing here is that even at 1080p, the video output is worse than a 5-year-old smartphone. I'm not sure how they managed to pull that off. Anyway, let's forget we talked about this topic and move on. There is one thing I'm absolutely sure about after making this video. I managed to learn a lot about the GR4 and I hope I have managed to remove some misconceptions around it. On paper, the Ricoh GR4 shouldn't stand a chance against a full-frame camera. It costs about half the price, it is much smaller, and it makes many compromises. But in reality, the story is different. Since buying the Ricoh GR4, I have noticed that I reach for it far more often than my full-frame camera. I take it everywhere and I feel more relaxed when photographing because it's easier to carry and simply more fun. The Ricoh GR4 may cost half as much as a full-frame camera, but it certainly is not half as good. Image quality is excellent, low-light performance is surprisingly strong, and the fact that it fits in your pocket completely changes everything. Of course, it's not perfect. Video is bad, it comes with a fixed screen and no viewfinder, and it's probably not suitable for professional work. But for street or travel photography or just capturing everyday moments with the people you love, the Ricoh GR4 will get the job done. In fact, it may even make you fall in love with photography all over again.